مرحبا،
أهلا.
كيفك؟
تمام. الحمد لله. طمني عنك.
ماشي الحال، ماشي الحال. Good evening, good afternoon, good evening in Gaza, I guess. Good afternoon here in Washington, D.C. My name is Bassam Haddad. I am joined here by my good friend Jehad Abusalim to address the legacy of Rifat Alareer. And we are also going to be joined via recordings by three of his close friends and former students, some at least. And we will be simply addressing this conversation as a way of providing inspiration. The way this all started is that we had a conversation at a gathering, and your testimony was so moving, and we wanted to have more people listen to what you have to say. So first of all, Jehad Abusalim is the executive director of the Jerusalem Fund. He's a well-known writer and emerging scholar, and he joins us here in Washington to talk about his friendship, his connection with Rifat. So, ahlan wa sahlan, Jehad.
أهلا Bassam. Thanks for having me.
I would love for you to start by telling us a little bit about how you met Rifat.
I met Rifat in 2004, late 2004, early 2005. I was in the 10th grade, and on a hectic weekday at school, I was called to the principal's office. You know, when you're called to the principal's office, knowing that you didn't do anything wrong, you feel that, you fear the consequences even of things that you did not do. So I went to the principal's office. I sat down. The principal was there. His deputy, members of the teaching staff were there. It took them some time to acknowledge my existence. And then 10 minutes later, when they did, they basically told me that I was selected by the school's administration to represent my school, Abdel Karim Al-Akluk Primary School, which was in Deir al-Balah, the town where I grew up in the central Gaza Strip, to represent the school and to attend a one-year English language program offered by Amedist, which is an American educational nonprofit that had an office and still has an office in Gaza City. The program included all sorts of courses, including writing, reading, general language skills, and I was excited and happy, especially at that time. This was during the second Intifada. I lived next to a settlement. So even going to Gaza City for that program on a regular basis was something new. Gaza City was just, it's a 20 to 30 minute drive from where I lived. But at that point, the Gaza Strip was separated by checkpoints in the north and in the south before the Israelis redeployed their forces. So long story short, I went to Amedist in Gaza City. I commuted from Deir al-Balah by bus, me and other students who were chosen to attend this program. And, during my first week at the program, I got to enter one of the classrooms, and I was welcomed by a tall man who had a light beard and a gentle smile and a very nice demeanor. And he introduced himself as Rifat Alareer. But, we were young, so we called him Mr. Rifat. And he was holding his expo marker, and he introduced himself as the person who is going to teach us academic English and writing skills. And immediately after he started talking, my colleagues and I realized how fortunate we were, how lucky we were, because for the first time, here we are at this, institution that has resources, and we are about to learn English with someone who is immersed in the language in ways that other teachers that we've been familiar with weren't, and who also was closer to us in age, and who embraced the English language not just as a vocabulary or structures or grammar. He didn't teach it like chemistry. He taught it as a culture and as a way to understand the world and to break free from the confines that surrounded us in a society that has been isolated from the outside world, separated from the outside world through Israel's walls and fences and restrictions on movement. So he started teaching us English, and he talked about the TV shows that we watched. He talked about popular culture, and he introduced us to new things that I'm happy to talk about. And this is how the friendship started. He also, as a teacher, Rifat was not just interested in cultivating a relationship and a connection with the student in the classroom. He stayed in touch with many of his students, including me, after the end of the course. He would check on them. He would, ask about their careers and their academic trajectories and offer support and write recommendation letters. He was there, he was available, and he was dedicated to helping students learn English and use English as a vehicle of empowerment.
For those who don't know Rifat or what he did and only have heard of him since his passing, since his killing, how would you introduce him? Rifat is
from Al-Shija'iyya neighborhood in Gaza City. He was proud of his neighborhood. Al-Shija'iyya is a neighborhood located to the east of the historic old city of Gaza. There are many theories about the name. Some say it's derived from shaja'a, bravery, or that it was named after one of the knights who fought with Salah ad-Din al-Ayyubi against the Crusaders, who then, the people named the neighborhood after him, and whose first name was Shuja', which also means brave. The people of Shija'iyya are proud, dignified, hardworking people, and Rifat was a proud Shija'i. He liked to say Shija'iyya time when we arrange events or agree on things that involve coordination across multiple time zones. He would say Shija'iyya time as a humorous way of talking about his connection to his neighborhood. Rifat was also a reader and a friend and a good husband and a loving father, and he was dedicated to his family. He loved his parents. He supported his family, and he was someone who, I think, found satisfaction in helping others and in being there for people.
Very quickly, a couple of days ago, maybe even yesterday, you posted something about Al-Shuja'iyya train station that was destroyed almost like immediately after it was built in 67, 68.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to say anything about that now that we're talking about Shuja'iyya, where Rifat is from?
Of course. I brought.
I'm sure it had something to do with his formation.
Of course. There are, remnants of the train station. Very few physical remnants of the station. I myself grew up in Deir al-Balah city, in a neighborhood called Al-Mahatta, the station. And although, and there is no, the train station, the stop on that route that the train took, that then would stop in Shija'iyya, there are there is no physical evidence that a station has ever existed in my neighborhood, but it's still named after it. So, you ask people, why is my neighborhood called Al Mahatta, the station? They tell you, oh, because once upon a time, there used to be a train station here. And the train, people would take the train from Egypt and stop here, or vice versa. So the same train would also stop at Shija'iyya. This was the main stop for Gaza City. And if you think about the moment the train station was destroyed, it was destroyed in 1967. Rifat would be born nearly a decade later in a totally different world. So the Rifat's parents experienced a Gaza that was connected at least to Egypt. And I'm sure they probably experienced a Gaza that was also connected before the Nakba to the rest of Palestine and the broader Levant region. But when Rifat was born, that station was gone because Israel destroyed it after it occupied Gaza in 1967, and took the steel tracks and used them in building its fortifications at the Bar-Lev line on the eastern bank of the Suez Canal. So there is a metaphor here. There is a metaphor about the kind of world someone like Rifat was born in. Rifat was born under a Gaza that has been occupied for more than a decade by Israel. The Gaza that Rifat was born into was deprived of all possibilities for political expression, political organization, and the ability of Palestinians to exercise their political rights, freedom of speech, embrace their nationalism and national symbols, build institutions that support their identity and identity formation. These things were all erased under direct Israeli rule. So Rifat was born into that world, and of course he grew up in the 80s, a decade where the situation in Gaza also deteriorated further, leading up to the first Intifada, the first Palestinian uprising in 1987, which would be the first defining event of his childhood and of his life. And he talks about that in his chapter in the anthology I edited, Lighting Gaza, and he talks about it in other places too. So again, it's a shift. The station, I talked about it because it for me, thinking about Shija'iyya today as a symbol for resistance and defiance, and as a place where people are being killed, and Shija'iyya also was a place where that represented connection and represented openness and represented hope and represented possibility, thanks to the train station and what it meant for the people of Gaza and of the region.
Before we move on, I'd like to move on to talking about its legacy. And you're going to be reading a couple of excerpts. I'd like to show just a quick video, which includes part of his last message. There are just a couple of videos that I'd like to show. And let's go to the first one. We'll probably show the whole thing. Hopefully we will not get flagged. So I'm going to rewind it, and it's not allowing me to. Interesting. Hold on a second. Something is up here. Okay. Here we go. Nope, we don't go. All right. So the glitch is now recovered. Apologies, everybody.
You must live to tell my story.
Let's start from the beginning.
If I must die, you must live to tell my story. If I must die, let it bring hope, let it be a tale. These were the words of Palestinian poet and professor Rifat Alareer, who was killed in an Israeli airstrike on Palestine's Gaza. Alareer, a professor of English literature at the Islamic University of Gaza, was also one of the co-founders of We Are Not Numbers, a Palestinian youth-led project that pairs authors from Gaza with mentors abroad who help them write stories in English about their experiences.
I'm an academic. Probably the toughest thing I have at home is an expo marker. But if the Israelis invade, if the target has charged at us, open door to door, to massacre us, I'm going to use that marker, throw it at the Israeli soldiers, even if that is the last thing that I would be able to do.
Alareer's death has sparked an outcry among those his life and work had touched.
So we have a video that's circulating online just before his death. We'll show another part of it. And we have the poem which he wrote, which has been translated into more than 200 languages. And we have seen literally tens of thousands of tributes from people who certainly did not know him, in addition to those who did. So why all that attention that is being given to Rifat, given that there's been thousands of people killed, and many of them have been quite productive and talented and so on. There's something about Rifat that is unique. Can you just share with us a little bit about his legacy, and perhaps feel free at your convenience to read any excerpts you see fit?
I think Rifat, the attention that Rifat has been receiving has to do with what he represented as an educator and as someone who, in the words of Ghassan Kanafani, knocked on the walls of the tanker, for those familiar with this metaphor. For Palestinians in Gaza, he represented hope. He represented empowerment. And for those outside of Gaza, he put into words, and he also helped other people in Gaza put into words this abstract experience of more than 2 million people that's rendered invisible, that's not talked about, and that's sometimes talked about in dry statistics, devoid of humanity, devoid of life. You hear statistics, Bassam, like, unemployment in Gaza is 50% and 70% amongst youth. Every 2 or 3 years when Israel, quote unquote, mows the lawn, people die and lose their homes and lose their relatives, or lose their limbs at the March of Return. What Rifat did was that he bridged the gap in terms of what it means to experience these things. And he also gave hundreds, if not more, youth in Gaza the ability to communicate these ideas with the outside world, and to use the English language as a vehicle to tell the story and to talk about what is happening. So Rifat as an individual, but also Rifat also as an institution, because individuals can be institutions too. His dedication to the project of telling us, those who live outside Gaza, about what was happening there. I mean, he helped co-found We Are Not Numbers, an organization that has been very powerful and very important in telling stories from Gaza. And he also, was a mentor to hundreds of students at the Islamic University and beyond. He contributed to, and he regularly wrote about Gaza. He also edited and co-edited multiple anthologies on Gaza as well. And he encouraged others to write. So for us, those who live inside, he was our voice, but he also empowered our own voices. And for the outside world, he was someone who tried for years to say, this is the situation in Gaza. This is why we need you to intervene. This is why we need the world to take action. And he warned of the consequences of the normalization and the prolonging of the blockade, that the blockade would be rendered eternal, that the international community just keeps forgetting about Gaza. He warned of these things. So I think this makes his loss an incredible loss for us on the inside and for those on the outside. And I also think that, it's not a matter of whether Rifat was more important than the many thousands who died. I don't think he thought that way, and I don't think it's a matter of familiarity. The artist, the writer, the author, the creative person, they create a sense of familiarity between us and them, even if we don't meet them in person, and even if we don't know them personally and connect with them on an individual level. This familiarity generated through art was very important in Rifat's case because, it's nearly impossible for most people around the world to go to Gaza and connect with people there. So art and literature and writing become the only remaining tools and vehicles at our disposal to make sense of what is happening there and to understand what is happening there. And that's why, people now follow and cherish people like Mu'taz or Balestia or Bisan, those citizen journalists very young people who took it upon themselves to document what's happening in Gaza despite the personal risk on their lives, and in the face of a shameful absence of the international media from Gaza. So this kind of familiarity is, I think, what fueled this love for Rifat and this appreciation for his life and memory and legacy.
You had a few things that you shared with us during that setting that I would love for you to share with us again, if you don't mind.
Absolutely.
Excerpts from what he's written.
Yes. Rifat wrote a chapter titled Gaza Asks, When Shall This Pass? And it was published in the anthology Light in Gaza, Writings Born of Fire, published by Haymarket, which I had the honor of co-editing. He wrote the following. In my New York Times piece titled, My Child Asks, Can Israel Destroy Our Building If the Power is Out? Printed on May 13, 2021. I wrote that my wife, Nusayba, and I are a perfectly normal Palestinian couple. We have over 30 relatives killed by Israel in the past 2 decades. One of Israel's most heinous onslaughts against Gaza in 2014 was the massacre of Shuja'iyya, a neighborhood adjacent to the border with Israel east of Gaza City. Shuja'iyya is one of the most populated areas in the world, with over 100,000 people, mostly children, living on a very small patch of land. During the massacre, Israel bombarded the area for 10 hours, non-stop. At dawn, the shelling stopped, giving people a bit of time to run for their lives, only for the shilling to resume. The images of the elderly women, children, and young people dead in the streets and in the safety of their homes still haunt us all. Among the people Israel murdered in 2014 was my brother Muhammad. Israel widowed his wife and orphaned his 2 kids, Ranim and Hamza. Israel also killed 4 members of my extended family. Our family home was destroyed, and so were the homes of my uncles and relatives. Nusayba lost her brother, grandfather, and cousin. But the most horrific massacre happened when Israel targeted my wife's sister's home. Israel killed Nusayba's sister, 3 of her sister's kids, and her sister's husband, leaving Amal and Aboud injured and orphaned. The rest of the family members were injured and had to be dug out from under the rubble. Nusayba's father's home and her brother's homes were destroyed too. The wounds Israel inflicted in the hearts of Palestinians are not irreparable. We have no choice but to recover, stand up again, and continue the struggle. Submitting to the occupation is a betrayal to humanity and to all struggles around the world. At the end of the day, nothing Palestinians or those who support Palestine do will please Israel or the Zionist lobby, and Israeli aggression will continue unabated. BDS, armed struggle, peace talks, protests, tweets, social media, poetry, all are terror in Israel's books. Even Archbishop Desmond Tutu, hailed by most people as a champion of justice not only against apartheid South Africa, but racial segregation everywhere, especially in Palestine, was slandered as a bigot and an anti-Semite. Renowned actor Emma Watson was attacked and accused of anti-Semitism for daring to post in support of Palestine solidarity on Instagram. It is not surprising then that Rifat Alareer, or Ali Abu Ni'meh, Stephen Salaita, or Suzanne Abu Hawa, or Muhammad or Mona al-Kurd, or Remy Kanazi is constantly attacked by Zionist trolls who wrongly use the anti-Semitism slander against us. No matter how mild the criticism of Israel's crimes or how slight the support for Palestinian rights, the Zionist lobby will attempt to scorch the earth to prevent that. This is further evidence that Israel is not merely after Palestinian armed resistance, but it is also after the very existence of Palestinians. I know that many Palestinians ask if more can be done, if free people can do more to prevent Israel from continuing to commit horrifying crimes against us. Can popular resistance or armed struggle or BDS or pro-Palestine groups like Jewish Voice for Peace or Black Lives Matter activists or indigenous struggle activists do more to exert pressure and prevent further Israeli aggressions, to bring those Israeli war criminals to justice and to end their impunity? When will this pass? When will it be enough? How many dead Palestinians are enough? How many massacres are enough? I recoil in horror and shudder as I write this. I am exposed, naked, and vulnerable. Reliving the horrors Israel brought on us is one thing, but disclosing your life and your most intimate moments of fear and terror, where you spill your heart out, is another. Sometimes, late at night when insomnia hits, I wonder if it is all worth it, if anything will ever change. When I was approached to write for this book, the promise was that it will effect change and that policies, especially in the United States, will be improved. But honestly, will they? Does a single Palestinian life matter? Does it? Reader, as you peruse these chapters, what can or will you do, knowing that what you do can save lives and can change the course of history? Reader, will you make this matter? Gaza is not and should not be a priority only when Israel is shedding Palestinian blood en masse. Gaza, as the epitome of the Palestinian Nakba, is suffocating and being butchered right in front of our eyes and often live on TV or on social media. It shall pass, I keep hoping. It shall pass, I keep saying. Sometimes I mean it, sometimes I don't. And as Gaza keeps gasping for life, we struggle for it to pass. We have no choice but to fight back and to tell her stories for Palestine.
So so I wanted to show this picture, which is you and Yousef Jamal, who actually sent a video that we will show in a minute. And Rifat, can you tell us about this?
We were in New York City. That was during Rifat's Gaza Writes Back book tour in the United States. I highly recommend that people get their copies of Gaza Writes Back. Rifat and Yousef came to New York, and as someone who lived in New York then, it was part of my duty to do the New York tour, which, almost 1 year into living there, I began to master. So I took them on the Staten Island ferry, the only free way to enjoy the water around Manhattan and enjoy the views. And Rifat was more familiar with New York than me, who has been living there. He liked Seinfeld. This was one of his, secret obsessions.
What did you like about it?
George Costanza. He was obsessed with George Costanza. And he understood New York's geography through the lens of Seinfeld. Of course, when he was very angry when Jerry Seinfeld went to the West Bank. I mean, it's one thing to be pro-Israel, but it's another thing to go to the West Bank and participate in a shooting range where the target has like a photo of an Arab. That's why he was very angry when Jerry Seinfeld did this. And Rifat also, although he was in the United States for a very brief period of time, he did not spare a moment to enter the pizza wars, meaning, the New York pizza versus the Chicago deep dish pizza, although he enjoyed both. But he liked to troll New Yorkers and Chicagoans about their pizza choices, and of course their pizza nationalisms. So yeah, I was in New York earlier this week. I went to the United Nations, and I crossed the Brooklyn Bridge in the morning, and I remembered as I was crossing the Brooklyn Bridge that this was the last time. This was where the last time I saw Rifat.
And when was that exactly?
In spring 2014. I saw him the last time on the Brooklyn Bridge, and he was happy. He was overwhelmed. For us Palestinians from Gaza, when we travel and see the world, we experience two things equally. So one of these two things, sometimes we experience more than the other. We become appreciative for the privilege of seeing the outside world, something that most Gazans or most Palestinians in Gaza don't get to experience. But also we become overwhelmed by sadness for the fact that we are excluded from this world and we are banned from being part of it and from realizing our potential and exploring our possibilities due to the pressures that we live under. We live according to a set formula. We do the same things, visit the same places, dwell in a very small strip of land that extends, 40 kilometers by 8. So when you leave, you enjoy, you appreciate what you see on the outside, but you also mourn the fact that you are prevented from being part of this big world, and hundreds of thousands are not allowed to partake in it. So I could remember this. I could detect that he was experiencing these two, I wouldn't describe as contradictory, but natural sets of emotions that someone like him or like me or like Yousef would experience on the Brooklyn Bridge on that day. And we said goodbye. They left New York with the promise, of course, of seeing each other again. In fact, Rifat was supposed to be here in the United States this fall, to participate at the Palestine Rights Festival, which took place at the University of Pennsylvania in September, and then to travel across the US for a book tour as part of the Light in Gaza book tour that we were planning. And he had multiple visa appointments in different countries that unfortunately he couldn't make before the war started, and then the war started, and he, of course, he was killed. But if things went as planned, he could have been here. And when I went to the Palestine Rights Festival, they gave me a notebook, and that was in September. And on my way back from Philadelphia to DC, I looked at the notebook and I said, what am I going to use you for? I have my other notebook that I use. And then when the war started, that became like the war notebook. It's where I take my notes and follow up on my commitments. But a few days ago, I did not realize that this notebook would become the place where I would write, notes on how to write a piece mourning Rifat.
Thank you, Jihad. I want to move to a video sent by Yousef Jamal. If you could introduce him to us, and then I'll play the video.
Yousef Jamal is a Palestinian writer and author. He's from Nusayrat in the central Gaza Strip. He just did his PhD in English literature in Turkey. It's where he's based. And Yousef was one of Rifat's closest friends.
And he's the one in the picture.
And he's the one in the picture between me and Rifat. And Yousef knew Rifat very well. Yousef was in Malaysia where Rifat did his PhD briefly, and Rifat basically, hosted him at his home and took good care of him. So for losing Rifat is a big deal for Yousef. It's something that has been shattering for him. And I'm really grateful that despite how difficult this moment is for him, that he took the time and shared this brief video in which he talks about Rifat's life and legacy and memory.
Rifat Alareer was a great mentor, teacher, and friend to many of us. He left behind a great legacy of young writers who were trained by him in Gaza and now are scattered all over the world, teaching at universities, writing about Palestine and promoting the Palestinian narrative. He was also interested in social media, and he taught his students how to use social media to promote the Palestinian narrative. The legacy of Rifat Alareer needs a long time to be analyzed and studied in terms of his own publications, poems, articles, chapters, edited books. Most importantly is his editing of Gaza Writes Back and Gaza and Silence, and his contribution to light in Gaza. Rifat will be missed, but we see him everywhere in Gaza, everywhere in the world, because of the impact he left behind and the legacy he created over the years. His life was cut short, but the impact he created will be remembered for years to come in Gaza and in the world. He believed in the power of storytelling and the importance of the written word, and that's why when he was killed, he was immortalized through his writings across the globe. We will continue to honor Rifat Alareer and continue his journey of telling stories and promoting Palestine everywhere in the world, on every platform, in many languages. Rifat was loved by his students because he also loved his students, and the legacy he left behind is because of his kindness. He was more than a teacher to us. He was a brother. He would check on us. He would visit our families. And he made everyone feel special, that he's special to him. He gave every one of us enough time, although he was very busy. Rifat, we will miss you always, but we see you everywhere. You're not gone, you're immortal, because you are an idea, and ideas do not die.
Jihad, one time you were telling me about some of the things that Rifat said about reciprocal treatment and how he would reject and object to even sometimes speech or attitudes about the other that the other has towards him and Palestinians. Can you talk a little bit about that aspect of Rifat, where his moral position comes through and through?
Do you mean in terms of telling the stories?
Telling the stories, in terms of refusing to demonize in a particular way that Palestinians are demonized, and those sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, Rifat was a strong believer in telling stories as a means of self-expression, as a means of rediscovering one's relationship with her or himself, but also rediscovering one's relationship with her or his country. Through writing, you're able to explore your history, your story, and that perhaps could become an opportunity for you to be at peace with who you are and where you come from, and understand yourself better. I mean, I myself, growing up in Gaza, I had a lot of bitterness towards the place where I lived. I mean, life wasn't easy, even though my life was better than many others. But still, every day that passes is full of unpleasant experiences, the basic things that we take for granted here, whether securing water or food or transportation or travel, or all of these things are a hustle in Gaza. You have to, there are additional layers that are added when it comes to securing all of these things. And then if you add to that, like as I read from Rifat's chapter in Lighting Gaza, additional burdens of losing family, losing your home, having, becoming homeless, having to find home again, and losing, 30 or more members of your family. So that makes you angry. And that makes you want to fight the entire world. And that makes you want to scream and do everything in your ability to undo this injustice that you experience. And I think, for us, Rifat's love for writing and his encouragement to his students to write and read and express themselves and reach out to the outside world were all things that gave us outlets and gave us tools to learn about who we are, to understand our country better and our experience better, and to reach out to the outside world. However, Rifat did not do that as a way of encouraging his students or mentorees to introduce themselves constantly as hapless victims. He also did that as a way to establish a dignified connection between himself and his students and the young people he empowered on one hand, and with the outside world on the other hand. And what do I mean by this? We are not playing the role of the victim in a tragedy. He taught tragedy, he taught Shakespeare and all of these things. We are talking about actual pain and actual violence that we were experiencing. And in telling our stories, we were appealing to the sensibilities of those on the outside to learn, to absorb, and to take action. And this is where I think where the story becomes powerful, telling the story, the act of telling the story. This is not just me, Jehad, or Yousef, or Rifat performing to an outside audience, especially to a Western audience, so that they can feel bad for us. No, we are telling them, this is your responsibility. This is on you. This is your tax money. And that's why Rifat talks about the dynamics of US politics, talks about the political influence of certain lobbies and groups in the United States, talks about taxes, talks about representation. He had to learn these things, not because he imagined himself as becoming a US citizen at some point and voting or paying taxes. No, but he understands the role these factors play in making our life miserable and in prolonging the occupation and in prolonging the blockade. And that's why when he writes, he writes about the pain and the misery and the violence, but he also tells the reader, look, you have work to do. And if you want to honor my pain, you are not allowed to feel bad. You are, but if you do, you have to take action. You have to do something about it. I hope I answered your question, but I think we are struggling to put into words this massive legacy. And I think, this is one of the ways I think we can understand Rifat's legacy.
No, absolutely. I wanted to bring in Laila El-Haddad's video, but first I would like to show a clip from a video of his, in which he basically was saying the last few words before he was killed. And regarding what I was asking about his story, a particular story, but maybe we'll come back to it after Layla's video. But first, I want to show this video, which I must actually cue. 1 second. So we'll start it at here.
On a live stream 2 months ago.
We know that it's very bleak, it's very dark. There's no way out. If there's no water, there is no way out of Gaza. What should we do? Like drown? Like commit mass suicide? Is this what Israel wants? And we're not going to do that. And I was telling some friend the other day that I am an academic. Probably the toughest thing I have at home is an expo marker. But if the Israelis invade, if they target us, charge at us, open door to door to massacre us, I'm going to use that marker, throw it at the Israeli soldiers, even if that is the last thing that I would be able to do. And this is the feeling of everybody. We are helpless. We have nothing to lose.
Rifat.
Let me also share that this is the Just World Books website where you can purchase Rifat's books. Do you want to say something, Jihad, about Gaza Right Back or the other volumes? I'll scroll through as you take a look.
I mean, Gaza Writes Back is Rifat's most important contribution. He it was a culmination of his effort to bring voices from Gaza to the outside world. And the name itself, Gaza Writes Back, playing on Gaza Fights Back, is a very powerful symbol that Rifat left behind. And I think I highly recommend people buy the book and read it, and understand the scale of Rifat's legacy.
I don't know how this made it. I put everything on silence, everything on.
You are a very important person.
لا شو important. It's not about that. And do not disturb, focus, and work at work. كله. Anyway, sorry about that. And the other book is Gaza Unsilenced with Laila El-Haddad, who will actually be sharing a few words with us. So let's actually move to that interview or that discussion with Laila, which I had earlier today. مرحبا ليلى، كيفك؟
الحمد لله منيحة.
Laila, we would love to get a few words from you on Rifat Alareer's life and your relationship with him. But first, let's start with, how did you meet Rifat?
I first met Rifat actually right here in Columbia, Maryland, where I live, in 2014. He was here on a book tour for the anthology that he edited, Gaza Writes Back. That was sponsored by the American Friends Services Committee and published by Just World Books, Helena Coban, who also published my book, The Gaza Kitchen. And so that was kind of the common connection there. And we had him here in Columbia. We hosted him for an event. And it was, some of the most beautiful memories. We went, I remember, around the main park here in Columbia. We took a nice brisk walk. He held my then 2-year-old in his arms, and he was excited to meet me because he had heard so much about my work as well, in English about Gaza, some of the earlier earliest work, I think, in the English language about Gaza in sort of the same genre or category of writing that he was involved in.
Tell us, Leila, what is it that that the world should know about Rifat? We have been following very closely since his killing, and we have learned a lot. But you have a special vantage point, and we would love to hear from you a few words about him and what you think he left us with.
You know, it was, I'm sure we've all heard this before, but it was such a loss. He was such a humble and compassionate and intelligent individual who never wanted the story to be about himself until, of course, the story was about him when he was killed. And he had a way, I think, of being able to, an intuition about recognizing the importance of storytelling, of narrating one's own story, especially as a Palestinian, where I think a lot of people pretty early on did not really see the benefit in that. And I'm not really sure if that makes a lot of sense, but I remember visiting him again in 2019 in Gaza itself. He invited me to speak to his students. It was one of the most memorable visits ever. They were super excited. I was super excited to be there. And he was trying to get them all in order. He was also this kind of father figure, I think, to a lot of them. And that's, I think, part of his legacy is that he literally raised and educated an entire generation of young Gazans, not only to communicate in the English language, but as I mentioned, to narrate their own stories. And these young people, many of them are now in their own right accomplished writers and professors and scholars all over the world who are themselves paying tribute to him. And you know, it's difficult to kind of overstate his contributions in that sense. It seems kind of like not so much of a big deal, but you have to remember for a long time, I think Palestinians were relying on others to tell their stories for them, partly because they either were not given the platforms or lacked the tools or know-how, or because they didn't think that was something very important. And over the course of 10 years, he equipped these young people with the tools of what I like to call literary resistance to overcome a suffocating 16-year plus Israeli blockade, educational and cultural, on them. And them being these young people of Gaza who constitute 75% of the population. And there was something incredibly powerful about that, about what he did. And I think that's why he managed to touch so many people, not only those who he taught, but he was particularly adept at communicating and conveying the reality of Gaza in both languages. And I think the reason it was significant that he was teaching them English literature and the art of communication, the English language and storytelling, is because it's, I mean, the way I think about it or thought about it is that it's the language of the countries that have been responsible for their being the students that he was teaching, their dispossession. You know, he will be greatly missed. I remember that was one of the questions his students asked me. They said, teach us how to tell our own stories. And really my response was, there's no magic formula, but you have to believe in the power of your own story. And it doesn't matter how harrowing it is. That's not the objective here. It matters that you tell it. And we went afterwards and we had a lovely dinner on the beach in Gaza with his wife, Nusayba, and some of his children. I have a picture of that I'm so glad I took. And that was the last time we met. We kept communicating. We worked together. We edited a volume called Gaza in Silence together in the years between 2014 and the current war. We were in communication during this current onslaught on Gaza. We just two days before he was killed, he had sent me an op-ed he wanted me to try to place by the mayor of Gaza, and I was asking him what his situation was like, and he was saying that still have that message. The bombing of the past 2 hours was worse than the entire week, and he didn't know if he was going to make it out alive. But even up until the last moment, he was trying to help those around him. And that's something else I think a lot of people don't know, because he never advertised or announced this. He was always finding ways to either shelter people. He was helping 50 people were staying with him, or provide them with food or blankets, or just find any way to be of use. I remember seeing him just last week while I was researching something for, this op-ed that I mentioned by the mayor, where he surfaced in a video as a volunteer in the Gaza Zoo. And I never knew that about him, that he just in his spare time loved to volunteer and help. And again, I think that's just speaks to the individual that he was and his legacy. And I hope that we honor that legacy through his final wishes, which is to make his tale a story and one of hope and inspiration.
Thank you, Laila, very much for this account. Where can one find the work that you and him collaborated on?
So it's called Gaza Unsilenced, and it was published by Just World Books, and I believe it's still being sold on their website.
Helena Coban's Just World Books. Absolutely.
Yes, I think I actually have a copy back here. Yeah, this is it. Yeah, and it was about the 2014. Yeah.
Excellent. Shukran, Laila. Thank you so much for your time. We hope to connect with you again in the future, perhaps under better times. And I really appreciate you coming on and sharing some of your thoughts on Rifat.
Yeah, it was my pleasure and my honor. Yani Allah yarhamu.
Shukran, Laila.
Thank you.
Okay. So we also have, before we give you the last words, we also have an audio, basically a file from somebody who knew him, if you'd like to introduce her.
Yes, the audio note is from Shayma Ziyara. Shayma was also one of Rifat's students, and Shayma, she's active on Twitter. And Shayma also lost her brother during this war. And I had the honor of connecting with her, unfortunately, under the circumstances of losing Rifat. And she always said very powerful things about him, and she was generous to, again, also share this note with us and to talk a little bit about Rifat's memory and legacy and what that means for her.
Okay, so this is Shayma, and we will play the note right now and see, hopefully.
Dr. Rifat was not any teacher. He was not any poet. He was not any academic. He was a larger-than-life Palestinian who wasn't only the voice of Palestine, but the driving force behind its brightest youth. He was my teacher since I was only 14 years old. I've learned a lot from him then, and I continued to learn so much through university when he was my professor, and beyond that when he was my friend. Rifat was an ocean of knowledge that would keep giving unconditionally. Armed with a mighty pen and a sharp sense of humor, Rifat was always a brave voice in the face of oppression, always resolute, never compromising. From him, we learned that we all have capable voices that can speak up against injustices wherever they may be, from the civil rights movement in the US to the struggle for liberation in Palestine. He taught us that our voices can be a threat to the propaganda of the Israeli occupation, that in the absence of Palestinian voices in mainstream media, it is up to us to disrupt the dominant narrative, to tell our reality, and to speak the truth, whether in rhythmic verses of poetry, profound words of prose, or powerful lines in a tweet. Rifat was a giant, and his assassination by the Israeli occupation has left a massive hole in our hearts, but never in our consciousness. Rifat lives on in each one who knew him or even crossed paths with him, even for a moment. His legacy is carried in our hearts, and his words are roaming the world on every tongue, in every language. The Israeli occupation thought that if they killed Rifat, they could silence his voice. Instead, his assassination has given a new life to tens of thousands of voices who learned who Rifat was, what his mission is, and now speak about Palestine louder than ever.
Jihad, I would like to give you the last word about Rifat, and I hope that this was enlightening and inspiring for people. I actually myself, learned even more than I've been trying to learn about him. So the floor is yours.
As Yousef said, and I'm grateful again ليوسف, Laila, وشيماء for sharing their words and for talking about Rifat's legacy. But Yousef said something profound in his brief testimony. He said that we will need plenty of time to understand and study and examine Rifat's legacy. And here in the Western Academy, we talk about the role of the intellectual in abstract terms. I know a lot of academics in the West who are dedicated activists and play an important role in advocating for, all sorts of racial and economic and political justice issues. But Rifat was an actual intellectual activist who engaged with the problems that surrounded him and did not accept them, and he ended up paying dearly for his resistance and defiance. He did not carry a gun. He held the Expo marker, and I think Israel recognized how important and powerful his role was, and that's why they killed him. But they've killed a lot of Palestinian intellectuals, and with their death, their words take a life of their own, and they become fuel for the next generation and for the present generation to continue the message and to convey the message and to continue the work of our intellectual predecessors and teachers and educators. Rifat's legacy will one day be studied and talked about in all of its manifestations. One thing that I have talked about briefly, and I will continue to write about, is how he transformed the English language from a language that in the third world and in many parts of the Arab world, people speak it to disconnect from the society where they lived, to a language that he used and helped and empowered his students to use to challenge Israel's blockade and intellectual and cultural restrictions. We will talk about Rifat as someone who did not hesitate to speak truth to power and who dedicated himself to his students and he took care of them, and he made sure that they were successful in life, regardless of the choices they made on a personal or a career level. But he also made sure that he inspires them to play an influential role in helping the cause to which they belong. So Rifat was killed. They killed his body, but they did not kill his words. They did not kill the ideas that he instilled in Palestinian society and beyond. And as Yousef said, Rifat is universal, and Rifat is now eternal. And he is eternal through his words and through his ideas and through his example as an intellectual and a thinker and a poet and a writer who dedicated himself to something bigger than him or his limited concerns on a personal level. Rifat will live through his words and through the dedication of hundreds of Rifats now who are going to follow his path and fight back and write back.
Thank you, Jihad. Thank you so much. I would like to end with just a portrait of him as we exit. Hopefully, his spirit and his energy and his talent and his dedication will be infectious.